If you've ever had an eye test at the opticians, you'll know that they like to present you with a set of letters, which you view through two different lenses in turn. And then they say, was the second one brighter, blurrier, or about the same? Well, why don't we apply that technique to the sound of two different organs playing the same piece? And the second. I'm sure that nobody watching this would disagree that the second organ was certainly brighter, more vivid and clearer. Proof that a church organ is like a lens. Depending on who designed it, its exact specification, the parameters available to the organist, one instrument can present its music better to the listener than another. So that's what this video is all about. The good, the bad, and the unplayable of church organs. My first trip of the day takes us to Broughton, a quiet village in Hampshire's Test Valley. If you visit, you'll be sure to spot the tower of St Mary's Church, standing proud at the centre of this parish. But what you probably don't know is that this church houses an extraordinary musical instrument, one which has been singing out for well over 100 years. What a blustery day. Welcome inside the peace and tranquility of St. It's just the wind. Welcome inside the peace and tranquility of St Mary's Church in Broughton. I've never been inside this church before, but my very first organ teacher tipped me off that there's a very special musical instrument here. This video is all about the good, the bad, and the unplayable of pipe organs. And this one is all three of them rolled into one. This instrument up here, on top of this kitchenette area, was built in 1872, specifically for this church. It has 638 pipes. And originally it was down on the floor. In about 1907, all of the pipes were lifted up onto a gallery, but the console was left down on the ground, which was quite innovative all the way back in 1907. Then, about 100 years later, this kitchenette area was built, so the console was lifted up to the top as well. It's not unusual for parts of an organ to be relocated during its history. But what is unusual is to find an organ of such excellent quality in a small village church. This instrument was built by a firm called William Hill and Sons, one of the greatest in England at the time. So this is a masterpiece of a church organ. But here comes the big problem. Organs are not invincible, and they start to fall to pieces, and that's what's happened to this one. As well built as it may be, it began to deteriorate. And nowadays, I'm afraid to say, it's almost unplayable. The Broughton organ is Grade 2 listed, but I've been advised that it's extremely fragile, and sticking notes ruin any hope of performance. Some of the pipes are missing, and many of those that remain have started to collapse. But listen to the recording playing in the background. It's reflective and it's sombre, but it's more than that. It's a piece by Mendelssohn, recorded on an almost contemporary instrument by exactly the same company, William Hill & Sons. Not only does it give us a flavour of how the Broughton organ might sound, but it also takes me back to the very beginnings of my own organ playing journey. When I was 15 years old, I was incredibly shy and reserved, but I decided I wanted to start learning the church organ. So my mum dropped me off after school, still in my school blazer, at the end of a cul-de-sac in Salisbury, and with the great spire looming above me, I met my first organ teacher, whose name was Robert. The 15-year-old Ben was taken up to the organ loft at St. Martin's Church in Salisbury, where I was presented with this amazing machine, an array of keys and stops and pedals and levers. It was an incredible contraption, but I hadn't realised at the time that it was also an artwork, an antique, a musical machine built by a professional organ builder. Some church organs have no nameplate on them. We don't know who built them, and they don't actually sound particularly good, but people don't really notice in church services. They tend to fall to pieces quicker. They don't last as long once they've been restored. They don't stay in tune, and they never sound as good. But some, like this one at St. Martin's, built by William Hill of London, sound magnificent, and they are always worth restoring. Boelmann's mighty Toccata, performed on a church organ built at almost exactly the same time as the now very decrepit instrument at Broughton Church. Not only does that recording show you the real quality and craftsmanship of an organ by a professional organ builder, but it also gives you a flavour, just a little insight into how the organ at Broughton Church might sound if it were brought back to life. I'd now like to turn to another great organ builder who, I must say, is ranked even higher than William Hill. His machines are as well built as the Cavaillé instruments in France, in the symphonic style, which was extremely popular during the Victorian period. His name was Henry Willis. On this channel, I love to discover village church organs. But Henry Willis was mainly known for his cathedral instruments, like Wells Cathedral and Salisbury Cathedral. So where could I find a village church organ? Well, when I first started filming for YouTube, I was told that there was one very small instrument hidden in a suburban area in Salisbury. It had been moved from a redundant village church in Essex. It was saved. But it was not quite where you would expect. No grand introduction, no majestic theme music, no countryside driving. I'm here on a suburban street in Salisbury. My venue today is a 1930s Roman Catholic church. A huge contrast to anywhere I visited before, but let me tell you something. I am more excited about this church than I've ever been, ever, on these road trips. We've got to go and see this. A warm welcome, viewers, to St Gregory's Church in Salisbury, by far the newest building I've investigated. It's a big concrete structure. This church was built in 1938. All of the bracing beams are exposed. There's a beautiful symmetry to this building. There's such a warmth about this church. Very bright, lovely soft furnishings in here. Something I'm not used to. And look at this. I almost cannot believe this is here. In 1871, an instrument was installed in the Royal Albert Hall by this builder. At the time, it was powered by 2 steam engines, and it was the largest in the world. Currently has 9,999 pipes. The largest one is 42 feet long. So you get a sense of the grandeur of the organ builder. At the time, he was at the height of his powers. His name, Father Henry Willis. I cannot wait to switch this thing on. So, we've established that this is an organ by the greatest Victorian organ builder. The closest Father Willis organ to me now is at Salisbury Cathedral. 4,000 pipes, a fantastic instrument which Willis himself said was his finest. There isn't much information on the organ here itself to give us a date or to give us any explanation as to why it's here, but through some digging I found out that it's come from a church in Essex. It was put up for sale in 2008, purchased and installed here in 2010, so it hasn't been here for that long. It's actually perfectly suited to this church. You can hear the wonderful acoustic in here, and this is quite a large organ, so it can fill this space. Hubert Parry's Jerusalem, played on one of the oldest surviving Henry Willis organs in existence. How about that? Before we proceed with the next part of this video, a polite reminder that I am never paid by any of the churches to make these films. It's a joy, it's a pleasure, but it's also a lot of work and it comes at my own expense. If you're enjoying this video so far, the least you could do is please to click on the subscribe button because it doesn't cost a penny. But it really helps my work spread to a wider audience. It also benefits you because it means that every time I upload a new video, you'll be one of the first to see it because you'll be notified directly by YouTube. Thanks so much. If you'd like to support me more, then that would be fantastic and I would be so grateful. Underneath this video, you'll see my PayPal link. That takes you to the Salisbury Organist donations page. And from there, you can leave a small contribution if you'd like to, and if you're enjoying these films, which I endeavour to put out every single week. Thank you so much. We've discussed just two of the many amazing organ builders in England, but I'd now like to turn to some of the lesser known ones. And for that I visited a church just outside Stockbridge in Hampshire. It was St. Nicholas's Church in Leckford, which looks stunning on a bright sunny day. But I'm afraid you can't have it all. Just as the rain starts falling, welcome to St. Nicholas's Church in Leckford. The earliest parts of this building possibly date back to the 13th century. It's a really interesting church because there seem to be plenty of signs of life, but no life itself. Immediately when you come in on the left, there is a list of the vicars of this church which go all the way back to 1283. And the rector then was called Richard de Leckford. There are ancient beams supporting the old wooden bell tower, and you can almost feel the weight which is suspended above you. It's quite a haunting building, but it's also quite emotional. I noticed at the back we have pictures of the bell ringers from 1996. It wasn't that long ago, but all of the young women in those pictures probably have families now. And as we move towards the chancel, I can tell you there are 3 organs in this church. Can you see any of them? No? Well, let me show you. On the left we have the newest one. This is an electronic organ, very small, hidden away in the side of the church with speakers up on top of the ancient beams here in the roof. I wonder why there's an electronic organ here. Well, let's go a bit further back in the church's musical history and we find a beaten up pump organ. We call them harmoniums, but harmonium usually refers to the French instrument, and lots of people copied the design in similar ways, not exactly the same, and called it a harmonium or a reed organ or a pump organ. And this is one of those. This one was built in England. and it's in such a poor state that it's not playable. Now, what about the third organ? Well, we move into this chancel, which is one of the most spectacular in this area, and yet nobody seems to know about it. On the left and the right, we have Venetian choir stalls from the 16th century. These came from a monastery in Italy, and they were rescued from destruction by a holidaying parishioner, apparently, who had them brought back in 1923. And what a marvellous addition to this church they are. I've been here before, but there were things I didn't notice then, like the memorials. Betty, wife of Henry King, who departed this life in 1790. But the reason I've brought you here is to show you this pipe organ, built by James Ivamy of Southampton, not far from here, in the 1920s. Actually, it was also a gift from the same parishioner who brought these choir stalls. Music is very important. But this organ is unplayable. Even though it was designed specially for this building, you can see how well it fits into this chancel. It's almost invisible from the church. The colour scheme matches the chancel, but this organ is unplayable. This is proof that musical instruments from 100 years ago are not invincible. So here we are again, yet another organ wearied by time and the elements, probably seized up, and now silenced for good. If an organ builder were to restore it, they'd have to climb in and out through this little door. But the situation is far more complicated than that. We've learnt about some of the most famous organ builders in England, like William Hill and Henry Willis, but I could also add J.W. Walker and even William Sweetland. But there's also the other side, the lesser known builders like James Ivamy and all of the anonymous instruments which I've played on my channel. These organs don't have the same historic status, and in some cases they haven't been restored for a reason. They tend to be more fragile and they don't tend to sound as good. And in a church like Leckford, where you're not likely to have concerts or teaching and where there are only 2 services per month, it's a difficult dilemma, isn't it, whether you restore that organ or not. If it were restored, it would probably fall into disrepair again, because it probably wouldn't be played much. Whereas the organ at Broughton Church would be used for teaching and recitals, I'm sure, because it has 2 keyboards and it's up in a gallery. It's a brighter church, it's in the middle of a larger village. You see what I mean? It's a difficult problem. I don't have any recordings of working James Ivamy instruments. However, I did look for the closest possible instrument I could find with the same kind of specification, by which I mean the same stops. Flutes and open diapason with only 1 pedal stop and no reeds, and in a similar kind of acoustic. And I did find an organ at Great Durnford, which was very similar and was also built by one of these lesser known builders. So this is the closest I can get to how the James Ivamy organ might sound if it were restored. Bach played on the Jackson organ at Great Durnford. That gives you just a flavour of how the James Ivamy organ would sound if it were restored and brought back to life. This video has raised too many questions and too many different subjects to tie all the loose ends together, and we haven't even started to talk about reed organs and electronic organs, but we'll have to do that another time. For now, I'd like to leave you with my all-time favourite recording on what must be my favourite organ from the Salisbury Organist series so far. This is an instrument which is covered in dust and muck, and it's collapsing under its own weight. But because it's such a remarkable antique, it still sounds incredible. I'm playing a piece which I wrote myself, which I have retitled on somebody's recommendation, one of my viewers. I've retitled it Resurgam, which means he shall rise again, and of course I'm referring to all of these church organs which could be restored. From depth to height, from height to loftier height, the climber sets his foot and sets his face, tracks lingering sunbeams to their halting place, and counts the last pulsations of the light. Strenuous through day and unsurprised by night, he runs a race with time and wins the race, emptied and stripped of all save only grace, will, love, a threefold panoply of might. Darkness descends, for light he toiled to seek. He stumbles on the darkened mountain head, left breathless in the unbreathable thin air. Made freeman of the living and the dead, he wots not he has topped the topmost peak, but the returning sun will find him there. Cheerio.